Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hey Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paragraj Acharya Ashram Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīmad Prabhupada Ki Anantakoti Vaishnava Brindi Ki Garantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Ki All Premanandi All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga Narayanam namaskritya naram cheva narottamam devyam saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayat. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 10. Canto 4, Chapter 10. Chapter entitled Dhruva Maharaja's Fight with the Yakshas, text number 1. Maitreya Uvacha Prajapate Duhitaram Shishumarashyas Vaidruva Upaye me Brahminama Tatsuto Kalpavatsaro Prajapate Duhitaram Shishumarasya Vaidruva Upaye me Brahminama Tatsuto Kalpavatsaro Mataji's. Maitreya Uvacha. Great sage Maitreya continued. Prajapate of the Prajapati. Duhitaram, daughter. Shishumarasya of Shishumara. Vai, certainly. Dhruva, Dhruva Maharaj. Upayeme, married. Brahmin, Brahmi. Nama, named. Tatsuta, her sons. Kalpa, Kalpa. Vatsaro, Vatsara. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The great sage Maitreya said, "My dear Vidura, thereafter Dhruva Maharaj married the daughter of Prajapati, Shishumara, whose name was Brahmi. The two sons named Kalpa and Vatsara were born of her." Translation responsibly. The great sage Maitreya said, "My dear Vidura, thereafter, Dhruva Maharaj married the daughter of Prajapati, Shishumara, whose name was Brahmi. The two sons named were born of her. Prabhu. It appears that Dhruva Maharaj married after being installed on the throne of his father and after the departure of his father to the forest for self-realization. It is very important to note in this connection that since Maharaj Uttanapad was greatly affectionate towards his son, and since it is the duty of a father to get his sons and daughters married as quickly as possible, why did he not get his son married before he left home? The answer is that Maharaj Uttanapad was a Rajarshi, saintly king. Although he was busy in his political affairs and duties of government management, he was very anxious for self-realization. Therefore, as soon as his son Dhruva Maharaj was quite worthy to take charge of the government, he took this opportunity to leave home. Just like his son, who without fear left home for self-realization, even at the age of 5 years. These are rare instances from which we can see that the importance of spiritual realization is above all other important work. Maharaj Uttanapad knew very well that to get his son Dhruva Maharaj married was not so important that it should take preference to his going away to the forest for self-realization. Omagyan Timadandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhievacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare. So, Dhruva Maharaj has become the king, and Uttanapad is left for the forest. So that's the basic system of the Vedic culture. First of all, one has to be dutiful. You can't give up your duty whimsically. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, better to do your duty with imperfection than to do another's duty perfectly. In other words, society is constant or remains focused or perpetuates or keeps going on when everyone is dutiful. When we stop performing our duty, then chaos ensues. Everything becomes chaotic within society. So everyone has a different duty. Not everyone's duty is the same. All of our duties are according to our varna and our ashram. If you're in an ashram, if you're a brahmachari, a brahmacharini, your duties are different to the duties of a grihasta or a vanaprastha or a sannyasi. But you have to do your duties. And Rupa Goswami makes this point in the Nectar of Devotion. Nectar of Devotion is a bhakti shastra. It is all about bhakti. It is not a book about material. It doesn't describe varnashram within the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Rupa Goswami makes this point around about the 4th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion. The point is made that Varna and ashram, the duties of Varna and ashram, are not angas of bhakti. They're not direct means of devotional service. They're considered gauna as opposed to mukhya. In other words, they are subsidiary. They are not primary, or they're not angas of bhakti. Being a brahmachari or being a grihasta, that's not an anga of bhakti. It doesn't mean that because you're a brahmachari you'll go back to Godhead. Because you're a sannyasi, you'll go back to Godhead. Because you're a grihastha, you go back to God. They're not angas of bhakti. They're just a support system. Right? They're supportive of our bhakti. They assist our bhakti. They constrain our bhakti, or keep like some sort of parameter to practice bhakti within. But we cannot neglect these duties, that's the point. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in the Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami, he specifically says, one cannot be negligent in material duties. You can't give up your material duty. And it's interesting that he mentions that, because the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Nectar of Devotion, it speaks all about devotional service, angas of bhakti. But one of the angas, when he lists the 64 angas of bhakti, one of the angas is, do not be negligent of material duties. In other words, you have to do your material duty. You can't neglect it. Right? If you neglect it, right, it will be displeasing to Krishna. If you're a brahmachari or a vanaprastha or sannyasi, right, and you're in the renounced order of life, you cannot overly mix with the opposite sex. You can only mix with the opposite sex in order to perform your duty or your service to Krishna. Otherwise, you cannot have free mixing. Right? And when you do mix freely, then it creates chaos, or it creates disruption or distraction within the social order. Right? So therefore, you're not allowed to do like that. Right? So it is not an anga of bhakti, being a brahmachari or following one of the ashrams, but if you neglect, then it becomes problematic. So therefore it cannot be neglected. And then it is described that you may have your particular vana. And Krishna mentions this in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter. Right? He says, it is better to do your duty than to do another person's duty properly. Even if there are imperfections in your duty, still you should do it. So then what is that? That means that according to your vana, then you have to perform your activities. You can't cross over to another vana in the traditional system. So a brahmana has his particular duties, right? And a brahmana cannot then perform the duties of a kshatriya except in emergency situations. He has to act according to his vana. He has to do his duty. And if you stop doing your duty, then it causes problems. So this is the basic anga. The basic anga, or the basic message which is being discussed here. Dhruva Maharaj performed his duty. He was made the king and he performed his duty. It means that if you're given some responsibility socially, you have to perform the responsibility. Just like when Prabhupada was on the planet, sometimes the grihasthas were bringing their children to Mangalati. And then Prabhupada said to them, do not bring your children to Mangalati, keep them at home and look after them. Because if you're bringing the child to Mangalati and the child's not getting sufficient sleep, it'll be detrimental to the child's growth. And then sometimes the mothers, they were going to worship the deity early in the morning. Prabhupada said, the child is your deity. You need to stay at home. Look after the child first. If the child is being neglected, then you cannot go and worship the deity. Only you can worship the deity if the child is properly looked after. So this would apparently be, why would Prabhupada not be saying, just go and do devotional service, worship the deity, that is your highest perfection? He said, actually, your deity is the child. In other words, the child, which is a material responsibility in one sense, that is your duty, and that must not be neglected. Otherwise, that will hamper your bhakti. So these things are a little subtle, and it requires guidance. That's why in the Varnashram system you have a guru. Krishna says in the Gita, you must have a guru. What is the best way to get transcendental knowledge? You need a guru, someone to instruct you and direct you. You need Shiksha Gurus, you need Diksha Guru. Because then you will understand these subtleties, what to do, what not to do. Otherwise, if you're left to your own devices, then things may or may not work out auspiciously. So here, Dhruva Maharaj, he's doing his duty. And then, what did Uttanapad do? He went to the forest. So he's also doing his duty. So the highest duty of all, samsiddhya haritoshanam, the Bhagavatam says, the culmination of all activities is to please Krishna, Hare. Toshanam. Toshanam means satisfaction. If Krishna is not satisfied by your activities, shrama evahi kevalam, then your activities are a useless waste of time. What are you doing? If Krishna is not satisfied by what you do, then what's the purpose of your life? So Uttanapad, he made the ultimate sacrifice. He gave up everything to show us the example. Not that we should necessarily give up everything, but to show us the example that the goal of life is to satisfy and please Krishna. So he left everything and he went to the forest. Now, we're seeing as time goes by, Kali Yuga is here. This is early in the universal history. This, most likely it's like a Satya Yuga time or a Treta Yuga time or something like that. Now Kali Yuga is here. Things are a little different. The principles are the same. The main goal of our life should be self-realization, should be Krishna consciousness. But from a material perspective, we're not seeing very many devotees go into the renounced orders of life. Right? And most probably, that's not going to happen a lot. We're not going to see husband and wives necessarily leaving each other and going into like sannyas type situations. It will happen, but it won't be so rare. But we'll see more like vanaprastha types of situations. Vanaprastha means that the husband and wife, at the end of their life, right, they'll still reside with each other, still associate with each other, but focus on Krishna. And that is also the Varnashram system. You see, in the first canto, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, they left together, went to the forest, and then perfected their consciousness. So that was the system which they followed. Generally, it is said, out of the four Varnas, the Shudras, the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas, and the Brahmanas, only the Brahmanas take sannyas. The Kshatriyas, they become Vanaprasthas. The Vaishyas remain Grihastas, and the Shudras are only Grihastas. They don't even go through Brahmachari Ashram. So, according to your situation, then you will do differently. Okay. So this chapter is called Dhruva Maharaj's Fight with the Yakshas. So it's a nice chapter. The chapter describes Dhruva Maharaj being overwhelmed when fighting the entire Yaksha army. Why did he fight the Yaksha army? What's that? What is it? What is it? I can't understand everyone's speaking. Yeah. So then he wanted to take revenge. Right? So probably the primary lesson that we'll learn from the beginning of that pastime, you have to control your anger. Just like last night, I was speaking to one of my relatives in my biological family in this world. We all have biological families. So I was speaking to one of my relatives, and they were upset because another relative, they just had a baby, and they weren't contacted. Right? So, upset. Does it happen sometimes? It happens all the time. Okay. It happens all the time. Okay. That makes me feel okay because I thought it was just a Western phenomenon. Anyway, they're upset because they had not contacted. So they're saying, they didn't contact, we're cousins or second cousins. They didn't let us know baby there. I said, I didn't even know they were pregnant. I didn't even know. It's actually my cousin, my direct cousin. I didn't even know they were pregnant. I said, the baby just came. I said, okay, that's nice. So I won't hear anything. They won't contact me, and I hope they're not watching the lecture right now. They won't contact me, and I won't hear directly unless, So, but my relative who was speaking to me, they were very angry. Why didn't they not contact? I'm going to ring the father and tell them, what is this? We're family and you don't contact us now. So I said, it's better to control your anger. Because when you're angry, you'll do things and you'll say things which will be detrimental to your spiritual life. That's why anger must be controlled. And it's interesting because if you look at the Upadeshamrita, the Upadeshamrita is like 11 verses, right? The Nectar of Instruction. Rupa Goswami has written 11 verses, which basically, it's like the system of advice for all devotees. And what he has, condensed into those 11 verses. It's like our entire philosophical practices in devotional service. It's like our whole practice is just within those 11 verses. So, the first 3 verses, the first verse describes 6 things you must control, vegans. The second verse, six things which are prasiditi, which means favourable to your bhakti. And the third verse, 6 things which are vinashiti, which means will destroy your bhakti, impede your bhakti. So he gives those first 3 verses, they are the formula for successful bhajan or successful devotional practice. If you want to become advanced in devotional service, to become advanced in devotional service, you have to follow the basics. If you follow the basics properly, you will become advanced in devotional service. You see, anyone who's advanced in ISKCON, any advanced devotee, it's because they follow the process carefully. If you don't follow the process carefully, you don't advance. Right? So you have to control those 6 things. You have to practice the second 6 things, and you have to avoid the third 6 things. Then you'll become advanced in devotional service. So in the first 6, he says, these are things you have to control. Now, it's an interesting list because Rupa Goswami could have chosen many things. He could have chosen 8 things or 12 things or 64 things, but he chose just 6. And he took the 6 most important things. Right? And he says, of the 6, right, the 6 things, one of them he mentions is krota. Krota means anger. It's very detrimental to devotional service. Right? If we don't learn to control anger, our devotional service will be impeded. Right? Anger is there. Right? There's nothing wrong with anger. There's one, like a scholar, or not a scholar, maybe an academic. They were meeting with Prabhupada in the 70s, having a conversation. It was in India, but the person was Western. They were doing some aid work in India in the 70s. So they came to meet Prabhupada from the Peace Corps or something like that. So they met with Prabhupada. And they were saying, Bhagavad Gita is not very good. Arjuna became angry. And there was a war. And war is not good. We all know war is not good. So in general, it is not good. So they were saying, it is not good. Anger is not good. And then you look at the conversation, or you can hear it, Prabhupada speaking. Prabhupada said, what is wrong with anger? We do not reject anger. Prabhupada said, anger is good. Exactly the opposite of what this person is saying. But the anger has to be for Krishna. Right? We only become angry. That's why Rupa Goswami says you have to have control of it. You can use anger, but anger is a tool. It's like in the kitchen. So you're in the kitchen, you're cooking for Krishna, so you're using one of the knives. The knife is an instrument. So you pick up the knife, chop the sabji, right? Clean it, put it back. It's a tool. You have control of it, right? If you lose control of the knife, right? Like, they're in the kitchen and then Bridge Basi Prabhu says to Jagannath Ballabha Prabhu, don't cook like that. And then, it gets the knife and it gets out of control and then so it's like, right? Then it's not vegetarian anymore. So it means you have to have control of the knife. It's an instrument, right? It can be very beneficial. Knives are very beneficial, right? If the knives are not being used properly, we don't have an offering for Krishna today. Devotees don't get breakfast today. So the knife is a good instrument. But the same knife can be extremely detrimental, extremely dangerous. So same thing with anger. It's a tool. A devotee, if he needs to become angry under the right circumstances, because sometimes the circumstances are correct for you to become angry, then you pick up the tool, you become angry, you use it, right, to remove the obstacle, right, and then you get it and you put it back, right. And we saw in Prabhupada's life, in his consciousness, in his service, sometimes he would be angry, but the next moment, completely peaceful again. One time, Prabhupada was in Amsterdam might have been maybe like 74 or something like that, around about that time. And then he was on live television and they were performing a jagya. Prabhupada was initiating a devotee on live television. So the devotees had no idea what they were doing. Which was quite often the case in the early days of ISKCON. Devotees didn't know what they're doing. So they're trying to set up the jagya and perform that. And Prabhupada was on the Vyasasan and he's saying, no, this is wrong and this is wrong. And Prabhupada was, it was quite obvious he was disturbed and angry. Right? And this is on live television, right? Public television. Right? And Prabhupada's telling them, no, not like this, no, not like that. He's pointing and he's telling them. You could see he was irate. He was angry. So he was telling everyone, do this and do that. And because Prabhupada was absorbed in Krishna's service, he wanted the service to be done properly. He was not, because of his exalted situation, he was not overly interested that he was on television. He wanted to teach everyone the service must be done properly. But he became quite frustrated because devotees could not get it together. And then Prabhupada kind of leant back in disgust, right? And there was one bhakta, he was standing next to Prabhupada's Vyasan. He wasn't even initiated, just like a bhakta. And he was chanting japa the whole time, and Prabhupada was like that. And he leant over to Prabhupada and he said, just chant Hare Krishna, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada looked at him. And then he picked up his beads and he started Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Started doing like that. So then afterwards, Prabhupada was driving back to the hotel where they were keeping Prabhupada. So Revati Nandan, one of Prabhupada's disciples, who was a Swami at the time, Revati Nandan Swami. So he was driving. And Prabhupada said, before they left, because after the jagya, there was a feast. So they cooked a feast. So as Prabhupada was leaving, he said, get me some feast. So they got a plate of feast, they put it in the back seat of the car, they drove back to the hotel. So then Prabhupada got out of the car and he started walking in. Revati Nandan Swami came around the back, opened up, and he looked, and the plate had fallen on the floor. Like, flipped over while they were driving the car and landed on the floor. The plate's upside down, the prasadam's on the floor. So he, picks up the plate, puts all the prasadam back on the plate. I think Prabhupada walks in, he walked in after Prabhupada. So he walks in and he said, oh, Prabhupada, the plate fell on the floor, so all the prasadam has been on the floor. So Prabhupada became even more angry. You can't organise these things properly. What is wrong with all of you? So Prabhupada was angry. Prabhupada said, I will eat it anyway. So Prabhupada took the prasad, even though it had been on the floor of the car, and he took the prasad. And then Prabhupada became more like peaceful and like that. So the next day, Revati Nandan Swami, he came to Prabhupada and he said, Prabhupada, he said, sometimes we see the pure devotees, they become angry. And Prabhupada said, yes. And he said, how do we understand when the pure devotee is angry? Prabhupada said, it is like the ocean. On the surface, it may look like it's very turbulent, or very rough and moving like that. He said the ocean is very deep and very peaceful. So when we see an advanced devotee, if they're angry, that's just on the surface. Their consciousness is very deep, and they do not become disturbed in their consciousness. In other words, it doesn't affect the entire consciousness. That's why anger is just a tool, right? You can be picked up, you can use it, and you can put it down. But it should not consume the consciousness. In the third canto of the Bhagavatam, it describes how anger manifests within this universe. It comes from Lord Shiva. And it manifests in this world. And then it describes, as it manifests, it comes out in the body in different ways. And when it consumes your body and goes into your form, it says then your hands become, because like that, and you become tight, and so we should not let it consume the whole form. Like sometimes, it consumes us and it becomes everything. So it should not be like that. It should be like a superficial. You use it and then you get down. If you're going to use it to that level, you only use it to that level like when a devotee is being attacked or something. Then we'll let it consume us and we'll just destroy everything in our path. That's okay. But otherwise it has to be controlled. Otherwise it consumes you. So this is one of the lessons that we learn from this pastime. Dhruva Maharaj let the anger take control. So we have to see, was that correct or was it not correct? Maybe it was correct, but maybe Prabhupada does mention in the chapter, he said, maybe it was a bit too much. His brother was killed. That's what took place. Right? So what was the reaction? Or what was his response? I'll destroy an entire race. Maybe that's a bit too much. It's like, Shukadev Prabhu says something to me, he gets angry with me, and he says something to me, and I say, okay, in retaliation, I'll burn down your house. Or, like, that's too much. And then, next day, he comes to me and his house is burned down, and he says, Prabhu, I was just making a point, I wasn't like, I wasn't trying to so we have to control. It has to be proportionate to the situation. So Prabhupada does make that point. Maybe because Dhruva Maharaj is an exalted devotee, a pure devotee. But even Prabhupada says, even for a pure devotee, it has to be proportionate. Anger has to be controlled. That's the point. So then another point in this chapter, because the chapter is called Dhruva Maharaj's fight with the yakshas. Right? Another point is that during the battle, the yakshas are mystical personalities. They have mystic potencies. Where do they come from? Kuvera, yeah. Yakshas are related. But where do they live? Where do the yakshas live? Yeah, they're Nepalis. Do you know anyone from Nepal? Nepal? Nepalis, they're yakshas. It means that's where they come from. And the Nepalis, they're quite mystical, right, as a race. They have, even to this day, there are some subtle energies. So you have to be very careful. The Nepalis in the temple. If Bhaktivedanta Prabhu asks you to do something, you do it. Because they have some mystical power. And if you go up to that part of the world, it is still known that there are mystical arts being practiced up there. Cursing and counter-cursing, and they can make you sick. Where's it go?
They can hypnotize you and do different things, yes.
Yeah, it's still, even to now. Like, they can hypnotize you, and if they do some, it's like black magic. right? If they do some black magic, they can make you sick, or they can even make you die, like that. So they have, all those arts are still being practiced up there in Nepal. It's still up there. So the yakshas, they have mystical potency, mystical power. So Dhruva Maharaj was fighting with them, and he was destroying them, so then they had to revert to their mystical potency. So they poured out their magic, and they started fighting with the magic. So at one point, he became overwhelmed by the mystical potency of the yakshas. They were overwhelming him. And it's interesting how he dealt with the situation. And Prabhupada comments on that. For a devotee, for all of us, sometimes Maya will overwhelm us. Does anyone here relate to that? You ever feel like that sometimes? Like Maya is overwhelming you? Yeah. Okay, devotees are saying yes. Sometimes you feel like overwhelmed by Maya. It happens to me. I feel like Maya is just like throwing too many things. Quite often, like I said, one family member gets upset with the other one, and then and then suddenly you're in the middle of the whole thing, and because I'm a Hare Krishna, they quite often call me, because I'm like the neutral situation. They call me and they all say, oh, this one's doing that one and that one's doing that, and then they try to get me involved, like I have to be the peacemaker. So I don't want to be the peacemaker. I want to practice devotional service. I just want to live in the forest and focus on Krishna. But they try to bring you in. So it sometimes becomes overwhelming. All these different problems, health problems, and then social problems, and then economic problems, and then all these different problems in life which come. So sometimes we feel overwhelmed. But then what did Dhruva Maharaj do? Right? He was becoming overwhelmed by the yakshas fighting him. Prabhupada said he just went within himself. And Krishna mentions this in the 2nd chapter of the Gita. Krishna says that when you're becoming overwhelmed in this world, a devotee should be like the tortoise, the korma. A devotee is like a tortoise, which means when you're becoming overwhelmed, you should just go within yourself and you should meditate on Guru and Krishna. Just go within yourself. And it's actually an art. And it's something that people in Kali Yuga aren't very good at. People in Kali Yuga are very reactive and responsive to any situations. As soon as someone says something, the other one just goes like that. You see, although you just walk down the street, you see two people, and then suddenly it turns into a whole thing. So it's something we have to learn as devotees. You have to become a little detached and a little removed from the external situations. We don't have to react straight away. That's the point. Whenever something happens, even someone says something to us, you're in a conversation, and then someone says something quite abrupt or quite attacking or something like that, we don't have to respond immediately. For some reason, everyone does that. Someone says something, we say, and what about you? And then the barrage comes back. And then it turns into the situation escalates. Silence is very powerful. Someone says something very abrupt to you. If you just stay silent for several seconds, it disarms the situation. Right? It's an art that has to be learned. Right? And it's very good for a devotee to learn these things. So Dhruva Maharaj was being overwhelmed, so he just stayed peaceful for a few moments. Right? And just let the whole thing overwhelm. And then once he had his energy, then he fought back, and he actually won the battle. Otherwise, anger, if you feed anger with anger, it escalates, it gets bigger. It's like a fire. Anger and fire are coming from the same energy. Fire, if you throw more wood, it goes higher. If you douse it, then it will become small. There's one story from Mahabharata. Krishna and Balaram and Satyaki, they were traveling together. And then in the middle of the night, they said, let's rest. So we'll take turns. 2 hours, Satyaki said to Krishna and Balaram, 2 hours I will stay on guard, you sleep. Then Balaram will wake up. For 2 hours he will guard, Krishna and Satyaki will sleep. And then 2 hours Krishna will guard, Balaram and Satyaki. So everyone will get 4 hours sleep. So they took rest. Satyaki was on guard. And then one Rakshasa came. And he said, I will eat you, and then I will eat your friends. And Satyaki said, then let us fight. So Satyaki fought with the Rakshasa. And he fought him and fought him and fought him. And the more he fought him, the Rakshasa became more powerful. So after 2 hours, he was exhausted. So he went back to the camp, and he woke up Balaram. He said, it is your turn. And Balaram said, you look exhausted. And he said, I've been fighting this Rakshasa. He's close by. Be very careful. He's very powerful. And he fell asleep exhausted. So Balaram went over to find this Rakshasa. And the Rakshasa said, I will eat you, and then I will eat your friends. And Balaram said, then you can try. So then they fought. And Balaram fought him for 2 hours. And the more he fought him, the more powerful the Rakshasa became. So after 2 hours, Balaram was feeling exhausted. This is Leela. Balaram doesn't get exhausted. So then he feels exhausted. So he goes back, he wakes up Krishna. And he said, same thing. Rakshasa is there, be careful, like that. So Krishna went. And Balaram and Satyaki are asleep. And he found this Rakshasa. And he said, what are you doing? And he said, I will eat you and I will eat your friends. And Krishna smiled. Krishna said, no, you won't. And he said, I will. I am more powerful than when I began. And Krishna said, no, you're not so powerful. And Krishna was just laughing and smiling at him. And then the more Krishna laughed and smiled, the smaller the Rakshasa became. And he became so small, he just became like a little tiny Rakshasa. Krishna just put him in the end of his dhoti, tied him up. And then Krishna came back. And then Krishna came back to the camp. Balaram woke up, Satyaki woke up. And they said to Krishna, did you find the Rakshasa? We fought with him for 2 hours, but we could not defeat him, and we fell asleep exhausted. And then Krishna untied his dhoti. He said, this guy? Is this who you're talking? He said, yes. So who was the Rakshasa? Krodha, anger. So this is the point. If you fight anger with anger, okay, anger will become more powerful and it will consume everyone. If you act in a different way, then you can bring it down. It is an art, because sometimes someone's angry and you just start laughing, then that can also have the same effect. So you have to be, but the point is, if we don't use anger to fight anger, if we can control, you can de-escalate the situation. Prabhupada said, stay cool-headed. Keep your head cool. Prabhupada actually said this. He said, particularly for brahmacharis and brahmacharinis. He said, stay cool. He said a brahmachari should stamp on his head. Stay cool. Don't become overwhelmed by lust. Everyone has lust. We all feel lust. But stay cool. Don't let it consume you. Right? Anger. We all have anger. But don't let it consume you. Otherwise, it will destroy your devotional service. Rupa Goswami says that. So you see, Dhruva Maharaj, he contained himself. Possibly he went too far. Even Prabhupada says that. He possibly went too far. So we should learn to be careful. And also, when you become overwhelmed in life, right, just stay cool. Keep it under control. And things always pass. Right? There's another pastime, we don't have time, but another pastime where Krishna says to Arjuna, everything will pass in time. Everything passes. Okay, if it's bad now, what do you know? It'll pass. Right? If it's good now, what do you know? It will pass. That's the material world. If you're really, really happy and life's going great, fantastic, just wait, because it will turn to... it will all fall apart. And then if it all falls apart, what do you know? It'll all come back again. So it's as a devotee, we just become a little equipoise. Matra spashas tukunteya shitoshna. You just know. It's coming, it's going. That's the way it is. Devotees don't get so caught up in these things. So we'll stop here, and we'll see if there's any questions or comments what we discussed.
you were talking about that has to be controlled. That comes from frustration and just not having what you want and being frustrated by the situation you're in, more so than being angry about protecting of Krishna's morals or properties or deities or devotee. Because you sometimes see somebody who just walk in to do service and they're very angry and they'll be pushing things around and kicking things. So that's the sort of anger you're talking about that needs to be controlled.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's not acceptable behaviour. Prabhupada actually said one time to Brahmananda and Gargamuni, he said, don't be disturbed when you come before the deities. Because they came before the deities and they were upset. Prabhupada said, don't be like that in front of the deities. So that kind of thing has to be removed. But yeah, as you say, then if anger in Krishna's service, that's okay. If someone's attacking the temple, then we will destroy them. We'd like to, but these days, then, if you destroy them, then the police will come and write a report. Why did you destroy them? And so it's all very Kali Yuga is very tricky now. How to do. So, any other question?
So you mentioned that we get overwhelmed by mind, and we need to restrict our sense like the tortoise. So how does that work, right?
It means you have to go within yourself. You have to become deep. A devotee is Gambhira. Gambhira is one of the 26 qualities of the devotee. He has to become very deep. Like Prabhupada was very deep. So when you're becoming overwhelmed, just settle that. Prabhupada actually said one time, it's a nice comment, every day in my ashram, when I wake up in the morning, we have a calendar and it has all Prabhupada's sayings on it. So each day you turn it over and new saying. So I have the same calendar, so every year it's the same. But I forget. So then after, and it's interesting because whatever's going on in your life in that particular time, you turn over and Prabhupada speaks. So in the morning I get up, then Prabhupada Vacha, Prabhupada says, and then then it sort of kind of begins my day. Then I can think, okay, what will happen today? Or what is Prabhupada teaching me today? So there's one nice comment, and then you turn it over, and then Prabhupada says, if you're feeling like disturbed, he said, just go to the temple and sit down and chant Hare Krishna and make your mind peaceful again. And he said, when your mind is peaceful, then you can make your proper decisions and like that. So we have to learn to do that as devotees. Sometimes if everything's becoming too crazy in the material world, just go to the temple. You're fortunate because temple is like 2 minutes walk, right? You come to the temple, you just sit down, chant Hare Krishna. And then after some time, you'll be feeling much more peaceful. Then you can focus again on like that. So that's... But when it says we have to become like the tortoise, it means we have to learn to go within ourselves. Don't become so disturbed. Because, life will make you disturbed. But don't react to that. Don't allow it to overcome you. It's okay.
I have one more question. So you mentioned about the neck of instruction, and in the third verse it says that it's really detrimental to follow the rules and regulations just for the sake of following. But sometimes it sneaks in. Like somebody just chant around, like I don't know, for my somebody sneaks in, just do my service because of my service. Or I just chant my rounds because I need to chant my rounds. So how do you get out of it? Sometimes it happens.
It doesn't really mean that. That's a different thing. Yeah, because it says Achahara Priyashascha. Then Prajalpo Niya Magraha. Niyamagraha. So this is the item that we're talking about, Niyamagraha. Neglecting the rules and regulations, that's dangerous for a devotee. You stop following the rules and the regulations, especially when you're a new devotee. When you're more advanced, then, Prabhupada, he wasn't coming to Mangalati. That's okay, because Prabhupada's so advanced. He doesn't come to Mangalati or he goes, then Prabhupada's the same. For us, if we don't go to Mangalati, there's a change in the consciousness. Right? So that's why. Niyamagraha means in the beginning, you cannot neglect. Right? And then the other is to follow too strictly. So it doesn't mean like the example you gave is like maybe, I don't feel like chanting my rounds, but I have to. No, that's not being too strict. Right? That's following the order of the guru. That's preciosity. That is favourable to your devotional service. That's a different thing. What it means, niyamagraha, means being too fanatical. It means like, you see a devotee, like, it says in the Nectar of Devotion, when you pay your obeisances, you have to put all of your 9 points of your body, your forehead, your 2 hands, your 2 elbows, your 2 knees, and then 2 feet on the ground when you offer obeisance. It says you can't bow down on one hand, like you chant. Sometimes you see devotees, they come in and they bow down, they're still chanting or something like that. So if you're sitting next to the door during japa, and every devotee comes in and does that, and you say, "Hey Prabhu, what are you doing?" It says Nectar of Devotion, you can't do that. Maybe that might be niyamagraha. Too attached to the rules and regulations. Okay, it's true. It says don't do that, but I see devotees do it all the time. So if I'm sitting here chanting in the temple and I see devotees, I'm going to stop my japa, come over here. I'd be spending half of my japa just telling everyone not what to do. So maybe that's too attached to rules and regulations. You understand? Yes. Yeah, so when it means, we should do that. We should offer properly, not have something in the hand. It says don't bow on one hand. We should do that. But, we don't have to become fanatical about all these things. But you have to be strict in chanting your rounds. You can't say, well, I don't feel like chanting, so then I shouldn't finish my rounds. That's niyamagraha, that's being too strict. No, that's disobeying the order of the spiritual master, which is an offence against the holy name. So you have to understand the difference. Does that make sense? Yeah. There's many examples you could give. Any other question? Okay. Over familiar with the deities.
You mentioned that there was some point we should not be over familiar with the gurus, and then you mentioned we should not be over familiar with the deities. So what does that mean?
Yeah, over familiar with the deities means when these things are subtle and you have to be very mature. It means that you might become neglectful with the deities. Just like sometimes with the family. You'll speak a particular way, you'll do a particular way. It's neglectful. So with the deities, you don't become over familiar. I've got something to do. Krishna's offering should be at this time. Radha Ballabha's Bhoga gets served at 12 o'clock, 11:55, like that. But I'm running a bit late today, that's okay. 10 past is okay. No, that's over familiar. You can't do that because then that's aparad, that's offence. When we're in the deity room, it says in Nectar of Devotion, you cannot speak in front of the deities. So if the pujaris are in there, but then they're just, dressing, but they're having a conversation, what do you think we'll have for breakfast today? That's over familiar, right? It says, no, you have to be like that. So it means like that, those kind of things. So, any other question? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki? Okay.